Thanks for the warm welcome. So there I was, this rugged table seated. The table was illuminated by a single emergency candle in the middle of a jungle, somewhere between the borders of Honduras and Nicaragua. Every once in a while, this barefoot man would walk by rather menacingly, speaking a dialect of Spanish I did not understand, a machete switching from hand to hand like he was looking for something to hit. Once he'd stepped into the shadows a bit, the nice woman that was sharing my bottle of tequila asked if she could hold my hand. And I kind of assessed me, her, tequila, man with a machete. But I said, yes, you can hold my hand. I'd been invited on that humanitarian trip by my brother, who was an emergency room nurse in Salt Lake City, Utah. He called and said, "We need one more, will you go?" And I said yes. I mean, initially I thought it would be me, a freshly out lesbian, and 10 Mormons. So now you understand the purpose for the tequila. But instead, the count ended up being 9 Mormons, 2 lesbians, and a dry bottle of tequila. That experience was really pretty wonderful for me. And little did I know that it would be the beginning of a path that I could not have predicted for myself. So sitting there at that table, stinky, tired, more than a little drunk, I let that woman hold my hand, and I don't think Machete Guy knew what the hell to think. Flash forward 13 years later, I'm in Columbia, South Carolina at a Starbucks, sitting with a group of people that invited me to have coffee. And they said, "So tell us your story." I suspected they wanted to hear about my work in LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender advocacy as director of South Carolina Equality. I thought maybe they would want to know what brought me back to the Palmetto State after a very interesting and adventurous stay in the state of Utah, but for some reason, I started talking about Honduras. And that was kind of perplexing to me, but then it connected, because you see, you never know where we'll go, but we won't go anywhere unless we say yes. So saying yes has become a guiding principle in my life. And I think that actually every great thing that I think has happened to me and exceeded my expectations, and certainly exceeded beyond my mother's expectations for my life, is a direct result of saying yes. Great. Now, okay, a little disclosure here. I know there's a movie about yes. I've never seen it. Apologies to Jim Carrey. And also, this is not a blanket philosophy. I'm not suggesting you take absurdly unnecessary risk, nor am I suggesting you make completely illogical decisions like supporting Rick Santorum for president. But I hope to convince you that saying yes as a reaction to opportunity is a reaction that will enrich your life, help you look at fears differently, and perhaps send you on an adventure. So the best way to demonstrate this philosophy is to go back to my story. So let's get back to Honduras. Because the woman that I met there became an irreplaceable part of my story from the moment she asked to hold my hand. A year later, she asked me to move to Utah and be her partner, bring my daughter so we could be a family. And despite the fact that I was very concerned about being an openly gay family in Utah, I said yes. So I packed up a U-Haul, as all good lesbians do. and she didn't know it, but I had picked her up from the airport. This is just coming back to me. I'd picked her up from the airport, and we were closing the door of the U-Haul, and I had already gone to Kinko's and had an enormous banner printed in rainbow colors that read, "Second date." I think Nebraska was the only state where we didn't find some gay people on the road going, ah. So then the year is 2004. We've been living in Utah for a few years together as a family. and there were several anti-gay bills and some of the most hateful and vitriolic rhetoric spewing forth from the senators who had sponsored those bills. I'll tell you, I had no idea that due to nothing more than a desire to live authentically and honestly, openly, as a lesbian, that I had been demoted to second class. I was learning very quickly that the privileges and entitlements that I'd taken for granted as a heterosexual were no longer available to me. And now in Utah, it was slapping me in the face. I needed to contradict these misrepresentations about me, people like me, and my family, so we went to the Capitol. And when there was an opportunity to speak against the bills, I said yes. Later, we were approached at the Capitol by news crews who said, would you talk to us about being a gay family? Are you willing to be open? And so my partner and I looked at each other, we looked at my daughter, and we all said yes. There was also a constitutional amendment, yet again defining the marriages between one man and one woman, lest we license the polygamists. And we sort of became the token anti-amendment lesbian family. Soon thereafter, there were opportunities and invitations, one by the mayor of Salt Lake City to sit on the Salt Lake City Human Rights Commission. I ran for and won and served as vice chair of the Stonewall Democrats. Served as chair for a couple of years in my community council. I said yes to all these opportunities. And then there were invitations to sit on boards, Equality Utah, Reach Out Read, the Rape Recovery Center, and I said yes to all of them. And then there was a day that really shifted things in a big way for me. The day a sitting House member decided that he was not going to run for re-election, that he was instead going to run for Senate. And all of a sudden, my phone started ringing off the hook, and these proposals for me to run for the seat were coming at me faster than I could process. I had never anticipated, well, in my fantasy life, I thought that maybe I'd put on a suit and go to the Capitol and be all powerful and everything. But I didn't know what to do and how to process it. So I sat with my partner, she held my hand, and we said yes. I didn't think I'd run for office at 35, an openly gay woman in Utah. Did I mention all this is happening in Utah? But there I was, putting my name on lawn signs and T-shirts and bumper stickers, cars, strangers' cars, everywhere. I won that election by 75%. But only because 75% of the district said yes. My legislative service really provided some amazing opportunities to champion causes for the most underrepresented people and issues: the environment, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, the uninsured, the immigrant community, children, women's rights, and to each I said yes. In 2009, I became aware that two of my friends, two gay men who were as loving and committed truly as any heterosexual couple I had seen in my entire life, perhaps all the heterosexual couples combined in my entire life, were having a nearly impossible time adopting a child. And so although the invitation did not come outwardly to me, I knew inside I wanted to carry a baby for them. And so I said yes to myself. The email sort of went like this: you might want to sit down. And it concluded with, I ovulate in 3 weeks. So, the daddies said yes to what must have been one of the more awkward proposals that anyone could receive in their life. I remembered this morning, thinking about this talk, that I was remembering a moment in labor when my pain had just reached the threshold and I was begging for relief and waiting for an epidural and just weeping. And I said out loud, why am I doing this? Why did I do this to myself? And I looked up, and the daddy, who was sitting there holding my hand, had tears in his eyes, and he said, because you're making us a family. The 2010 legislative session, which was my fourth and final legislative session, was the only session in which I didn't run any bills. And yet, I ran them, they were ignored. But it was the only session in which I didn't pass any legislation, and yet I think it was my most successful. There was an onslaught of anti-gay bills that directly threatened the progress that had been made by the equality organization in that state, to secure protections on a municipal level. We have a very similar strategy in South Carolina, and it's really very effective. But this legislation wanted to cut down those municipal protections in employment and housing and public accommodation. I knew that the only way to stop it was just to call a timeout on the legislation. And so I worked with my colleagues and tried to negotiate a legislative moratorium. We even held a press conference. It was going so well, crash and burn, it fell apart. And then I realized it was just going to be up to me. So I approached the Senate president, and on the last day of negotiation said to him, 10 years ago, you would have not treated me this way. 10 years ago, you would have considered me your equal, albeit that I'm a woman. What about me is different? Why am I less deserving? Why do I deserve to be an undefined underclass? He sort of mumbled a little bit and said that he didn't really have an explanation for that. But that's the day we held a press conference, and the moratorium was accepted, and we went through with it, and it was great. At that time, Utah had 2 municipalities with protections, and because of that moratorium and the hard work of Equality Utah, now they have nearly a dozen. It's a good thing. So now I'm in South Carolina, taking what I know about conservative state strategy and applying it to the Palmetto State. Everywhere I go, I ask people to do one thing: say yes. I ask legislators to say yes to sponsoring and supporting legislation that treats everyone equally. I ask mayors and council people to please say yes to getting those municipal protections that I explained to you in place. I ask members of the LGBT community to come out. Come out. Say yes to coming out. And say yes to supporting the organizations that are advocating on your behalf. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not that I don't feel fear. I am constantly afraid. I constantly have fears and insecurities. But I've made a conscientious decision to think about the fears after I've already said yes, because I believe that fears are so much better viewed in the rear view. Don't you think? They're so much smaller. They have little, if any, value as fears. And so I'm running out of time, unfortunately. I should have timed this speech, actually. I don't think I ever did. But I'll tell you, without me being aware of it, a shift had occurred in me. It was a philosophical shift that took me from being a naysayer to an opportunity seeker, to someone who looks forward to the next adventure. And I can feel it coming. Can you feel it coming? Can you? Because it's going to be great. And it's available to all of us if we'll just shift our perspective and be open to it. It's so easy to focus on the lack. I lack marriage. I lack equal protections. I lack friends. I lack money. I lack happiness, on and on and on and on. When the reality is it's just quite the opposite. We have more than we need. Every nonprofit we need to fund, every illness that needs a cure and is waiting to be discovered, everything that we want to change and correct about our lives, we can. And so I'm hoping that my story has been somewhat inspirational to you, and that rather than focusing on the lack, you'll step up and seize the opportunity to say yes to that thing. You know what it is? That thing you care about, that thing that boils your blood, that thing you want to change, because your contribution might be the contribution that makes it right, makes a difference, creates the change. I invite all of you to leapfrog your fears, put them aside, think about them afterward, and say yes. And so maybe you think, okay, well now she's going to tell me how to say yes, what to say yes to. And I can't, because it's within each of you patiently waiting to be discovered. So I'm hoping that maybe you'll find some inspiration in a poem by an American poet named Andrea Gibson. It's called Saying Yes. Snap it, that's right. And hopefully she'll forgive me for doing a gross injustice to the last half of her poem, Saying Yes. This is for no becoming yes, for fear becoming trust, for saying I love you to people who will never say it to us, for scraping away the rust and remembering how to shine, for the dime you gave away when you didn't have a penny, for the many beautiful things we do, for every song that's ever been sung, for refusing to believe in miracles because miracles are the impossible coming true, and everything is possible. This is for the possibility that guides us, and for the possibility still waiting to sing and spread their wings inside us. Because tonight, Saturn is on his knees, proposing with all his 10,000 rings that whatever song you've been singing, you sing even more. The world needs us right now more than it ever has before. Pull all your strings. Play every chord. If you're writing letters to the prisoners, start tearing down the bars. If you're handing out flashlights in the dark, start handing out stars. Never go a second. Hush in the percussion of your heart. Play loud. Play like the apocalypse is only 4, 3, 2. But you have a drum in your chest that could save us. You have a song like a breath that could raise us like a sunrise into the dark sky that cries to be blue. Play like you know we won't survive if you don't, but we will if you do. Play like Saturn is on his knees, proposing with all his 10,000 rings that we give every single breath. Y'all, this is for saying yes. This is for saying yes.